There is a moment that happens to almost everyone, usually late at night, usually alone, usually after checking a bank balance that seems impossibly low given how hard you have been working. You stare at the number and something does not add up. You earned money this month, you went to work, you did your job, you received a paycheck that should have been enough, and yet here you are, days before the next payday, with almost nothing to show for it. The money came in, the money went out, and somewhere in between something happened that you cannot quite explain, cannot quite trace, cannot quite understand. You are not living extravagantly. You are not making obviously terrible decisions. You're just somehow always behind, always short, always wondering where it all went. But here is what nobody tells you. The transformation does not require earning more money. It does not require a windfall or a promotion or a lucky break. The transformation requires doing something every day that most people never do, something so simple that it seems almost too obvious to matter. And yet this one thing, practiced consistently, will change your financial life in ways that seem almost impossible until you experience them yourself. Let me start by showing you something uncomfortable. There are leaks in your financial life that you do not see. Not the big expenses, the ones you track and budget for and think about carefully. The small ones. The subscriptions you signed up for and forgot about, still charging your card every month for services you have not used in years. The impulsive purchases that seemed small in the moment, but add up to hundreds or thousands over time. The convenience fees, the late fees, the charges for things you could have avoided if you had been paying attention. The consumer loans for things you did not need, carrying interest that quietly multiplies while you focus on other things. These are not dramatic failures. They are not the kind of mistakes that feel like mistakes when you make them. They are the accumulated weight of inattention, the compound interest of carelessness, the slow erosion that happens when you're not watching. And the tragedy is that this erosion eats the results of all your work. You labour for hours to earn money, and then you lose significant portions of it to leaks you never even notice. I want to give you specific examples because specificity makes this real. The book subscription that charges $15 a month for books you stopped reading. The phone plan that costs $20 more than the identical plan from a competitor because you have not compared prices in 3 years. The bank fees for transfers that could be free if you used a different account. The equipment you rent monthly when buying it outright would have paid for itself 8 months ago. These are not hypothetical. These are the kinds of leaks that exist in almost everyone's financial life, silently draining resources that could be building something. And here is what happens when you actually look. When you sit down with your bank statements and credit card bills and go through them, line by line, not skimming, not assuming you know what is there, but actually examining every charge. Most people who do this for the first time experience something like shock. They discover expenses they had forgotten. They find patterns they had not noticed. They realize that the vague sense of money disappearing was not vague at all. It was specific, traceable, and in many cases completely unnecessary. This awareness is the starting point. Not the ending point, not the solution itself, but the necessary foundation for everything that follows. You cannot fix what you cannot see. You cannot stop leaks you do not know exist. The self-audit, the honest examination of where your money actually goes, is the first step toward any meaningful change. And most people never take it because it is uncomfortable, because it requires confronting decisions they would rather not examine. Because ignorance feels easier than awareness, even when ignorance is costing them thousands of dollars a year. But awareness alone is not enough. You can know where the money goes and still watch it go there. You can see the leaks and still not plug them. This is because the problem is not just informational, it is behavioral. It is about the patterns and habits that shape your relationship with money. And the most important of these patterns centers on a single day that most people never think about strategically. Payday. Payday is not just the day money arrives. Payday is the decision point that shapes your entire month and, compounded over years, shapes your entire financial life. What you do in the first 24 hours after money hits your account determines more about your financial future than almost any other factor. And most people have never thought about this deliberately. They have never examined their payday behavior as a pattern that could be changed. Let me show you the 4 categories that people fall into on payday, because recognizing which one describes you is the first step toward changing it. The first category is people who have already spent the money before it arrives. They have committed the paycheck to obligations incurred during the previous month. The credit card charges, the loans, the purchases made in anticipation of future income. When payday comes, the money does not flow in and then out. It was already out. It was spent before it was earned, and the paycheck merely settles debts rather than creating possibilities. For people in this category, payday is not a beginning. It is a formality. The money was never really theirs. They are living in a permanent state of catching up, and catching up is not the same as getting ahead. The second category is people who treat payday as a celebration. The money arrives, and it feels like permission. Permission to reward yourself for working hard. Permission to buy the thing you have been wanting. Permission to go out, to treat yourself, to spend emotionally because you have earned this, literally. And the problem is not that you should never enjoy your money. The problem is that emotional spending in the first days after payday consumes resources that could be allocated strategically. The celebration depletes the account before the month's real expenses even arrive, and then you spend the rest of the month in scarcity, stretched thin, wondering how the paycheck disappeared so fast. The third category is people who hesitate. The money arrives, and they are not sure what to do with it. They have vague intentions but no clear plan. They discuss, they consider, they think about maybe starting to save, or maybe paying off that debt, or maybe doing something different this month. And while they hesitate, the money leaks out through the normal channels, the automated payments, and the daily expenses and the small purchases that do not seem significant individually. By the time they decide what to do, there is nothing left to do it with. Indecision is a decision, and it is usually the wrong one. The fourth category is goal-first people. These are the people who treat payday as an action trigger rather than a celebration, or a settling of debts, or a moment of uncertainty. The money arrives, and before anything else happens, before a single discretionary purchase, before the lifestyle spending begins, they move money toward their goal. Savings, investment, debt repayment. Whatever the priority is, it gets funded first, automatically, non-negotiably, and then they live on what remains. This is the category that builds wealth. Not because they earn more, not because they have better luck, because they have aligned their behavior with their priorities. They have made the decision before the money arrives, not after. They have chosen their goal over their desires, and they have structured their payday to enforce that choice. The phrase I want you to remember is this: first buy your goal. Before you buy anything else, before you pay anyone else, before you allow the money to disappear into the undifferentiated flow of monthly expenses, buy your goal. Put money toward the future you claim to want. Make that the first transaction, not the last. Because if it is last, it will never happen. There will always be something else. There will always be another expense, another want, another reason why this month is different, and you will start next month. Next month never comes for people who pay themselves last. And this brings us to a truth that most people resist because it challenges comforting beliefs about why they are not wealthy. Wealth comes from management, not just income. Two people can earn exactly the same salary and end up in completely different financial positions 5 years later. Same income, same opportunities, dramatically different outcomes. The difference is not luck. The difference is the quality of decisions made with identical resources. This is uncomfortable because it removes the excuse. If wealth were purely about income, you could tell yourself that you would be wealthy if only you earned more, and the problem would be external, someone else's fault, beyond your control. But if wealth is about management, if it is about what you do with what you have, then the problem becomes internal. It becomes about your choices, your habits, your patterns. And internal problems are harder to accept because they require internal solutions. But internal problems are also the ones you can actually solve. You cannot control the economy. You cannot control your employer's decisions about compensation. You cannot control 1,000 external factors that affect your financial life. But you can control how you manage what you have. You can control your payday behavior. You can control whether you audit your expenses. You can control whether you plug the leaks. These controls are available to you right now, regardless of your income level, regardless of your circumstances, regardless of anything external. And here is where people make a critical error, especially when expenses exceed income, which happens to almost everyone at some point. When there is not enough money to cover everything, most people panic. They pay whatever is most urgent, whatever is making the most noise, whatever threatens the most immediate consequences. They become reactive, responding to pressure rather than acting from strategy. And this reactivity ensures that the things that matter most, the goals, the future, the financial progress, get funded last or not at all. The alternative is counterintuitive but essential. Decision first, then money. When you do not have enough to cover everything, you must analyze your situation, set priorities deliberately, make a decision about what matters most, and then allocate your limited resources according to that decision. This is not about ignoring obligations or defaulting on responsibilities. It is about recognizing that you cannot do everything, that something will not get fully funded, and that you should choose what that something is rather than letting circumstances choose for you. This is the difference between power and slavery. When you let external pressures dictate your financial decisions, when you simply react to whatever demands attention most loudly, you are a slave to your expenses. You have no agency. You're being controlled by forces outside yourself. But when you analyze, prioritize, and decide before you spend, you reclaim power. You become the director of your financial life rather than a passive recipient of whatever happens. And let me be clear about something. Higher income does not solve this problem. People think that earning more would fix everything, that if they just made 20% more, they would finally get ahead. But higher income without better decisions just produces the same problems at a higher scale. The lifestyle expands to match the income, the leaks multiply, the payday patterns remain unchanged. You end up with more money flowing through your life, but no more actually staying. Bad decisions with higher income equal temporary success at best. The pattern catches up with you. It always does. This is what I mean by financial slavery versus financial control. Living in constant deficit, always behind, always catching up, is not just a financial position. It becomes a mindset, an identity, a way of experiencing life. You start to believe that this is just how things are, that money is inherently scarce, that you will always be struggling. And this belief shapes your behavior in ways that guarantee its own fulfillment. The scarcity mindset creates the scarcity reality. The cruel irony is that this can happen to anyone, regardless of income or profession. There are doctors who are financial slaves, engineers, lawyers, people earning six figures who have no margin, no buffer, no control over their financial lives, because the slavery is not about how much you earn. It is about the relationship between what you earn and what you spend, and whether you control that relationship or it controls you. You either control your expenses or your expenses control you. There is no neutral position. There is no standing still. Every day, through the accumulated weight of small decisions, you are either gaining control or losing it. And most people, because they never think about this deliberately, are slowly losing control without even realizing it. They wonder why they feel stressed about money even when their income is reasonable. The stress is not about the income. The stress is about the lack of control. So how do you gain control? The principle is ancient and simple, but almost nobody follows it. Pay yourself first. This means that when money arrives, before you pay anyone else, before you cover any other obligation, you set aside something for yourself, for your savings, for your investments, for your future. You make yourself the first creditor, not the last. Most people do the opposite. They pay rent first, utilities first, subscriptions first, everyone and everything else first, and then they save whatever is left over. And whatever is left over is almost always nothing. Because expenses expand to fill available resources. Because there is always something else that needs the money. Because when you pay yourself last, you are making yourself the lowest priority, and the lowest priority never gets funded. The amount does not matter as much as the habit. If you can save 10%, save 10%. If you can only save 5%, save 5%. If you are in such a tight position that 5% seems impossible, save 1%. The point is not the amount. The point is establishing the pattern, building the habit, training yourself to prioritize your future self. 1% of your income is almost nothing in practical terms, but it is everything in psychological terms. It is proof that you can do this. It is the foundation that larger savings will build upon. 1 gram of gold is still gold, 1% saved is still saving. And here is what happens when you do this consistently. The amount grows, obviously, but something else grows too. Your financial intelligence. You start to think differently about money. You start to see opportunities you did not see before. You start to make decisions from a position of having something rather than having nothing. The habit of paying yourself first changes not just your bank balance, but your entire relationship with money. But I want to be honest about why this is so difficult, why most people know they should do this and still do not. The difficulty is not intellectual. The difficulty is emotional. Without a system, people act chaotically. They respond to advertisements designed by experts to trigger spending. They compare themselves to others on social media and feel inadequate. They experience cravings and impulses that seem to come from nowhere, but are actually the result of sophisticated manipulation. The world is designed to take your money. Every app, every store, every piece of marketing you encounter has been optimized to separate you from your resources. You're not fighting against your own weakness. You're fighting against an army of professionals whose entire job is to make you spend. This is why systems beat emotions. Emotions are unreliable, variable, subject to manipulation. A system executes regardless of how you feel. The automatic transfer that moves money to savings on payday does not care if you are tired or stressed or tempted. It just executes. The budget that allocates money to categories before you spend it does not negotiate with your impulses. It just constrains. Systems create structure, and structure creates progress. Without structure, you're relying on willpower alone, and willpower loses to professional manipulation almost every time. And here is something important about why you were never taught this. If you grew up in certain environments, particularly if you have roots in post-Soviet countries or similar contexts, you were taught to be a good specialist. You were taught to study hard, get credentials, develop expertise in a field. You were taught that professional competence would lead to financial security, but you were never taught to manage money. There was no class on personal finance. There was no education on how wealth actually works. You emerged into adulthood with strong technical skills and almost no financial skills, and you've been trying to figure it out ever since through trial and error, mostly error. This is not your fault, but it is your responsibility now. The gap in your education does not excuse the gap in your financial life. You can have strong academic intelligence and weak financial intelligence. You can be excellent at your profession and terrible at managing what your profession pays you. Until you address the financial intelligence gap deliberately, through learning and practice and building systems, your professional success will never translate into financial success. The money will come in and go out, and you will remain exactly where you are. And financial status is not just about money, it affects everything else. Your family, your opportunities, your freedom, your ability to help others. When you do not control your finances, you are constrained in ways that ripple through every area of life. You cannot take the risk on the better job. You cannot help the family member in need. You cannot pursue the opportunity that requires some financial runway. You are trapped, not by external circumstances, but by the accumulated weight of patterns you never examined. But let me address one more trap, one that keeps people stuck even when they start to understand all of this: comparison. You look at others who seem to be doing better, and you feel inadequate. You see their results, their possessions, their lifestyle, and you measure yourself against them. And this comparison either paralyzes you with despair or pushes you towards spending you cannot afford in an attempt to match what you see. But you are seeing their results without seeing their path. You're seeing the highlight reel without seeing the struggle. You are comparing your behind the scenes to their public performance. And even if they are genuinely doing better than you, even if their success is real and earned, their path is not your path. Their circumstances are not your circumstances. Their comparison is irrelevant to your situation. The only person you need to beat is your past self. The only comparison that matters is whether you are better today than you were yesterday, better this month than last month, better this year than last year. This is not motivational platitude. This is practical strategy. Comparison to others distracts you from the actions that would actually improve your situation. Focus on those actions instead. Focus on what moves you toward your goal. Let others have their journey while you walk yours. So what do you do every day? You audit. You examine where the money goes. You notice the leaks and plug them. You approach payday strategically as the decision point that shapes everything else. You pay yourself first, even if the amount is small, building the habit that becomes the foundation. You build systems that execute regardless of your emotional state. You stop comparing yourself to others and start comparing yourself to your past self. You recognize that wealth comes from management, not just income, and you manage deliberately. None of this is complicated. All of it is difficult. Difficult because it requires changing patterns that feel automatic. Difficult because it requires confronting uncomfortable truths about your own behavior. Difficult because the world is designed to undermine these practices and you must resist that design every day. But here is what happens when you do this consistently. The leaks stop. The payday becomes a launch point rather than a settling of debts. The savings accumulate. The financial intelligence develops. The stress decreases as control increases. The options multiply as resources grow. The future that seemed impossible begins to seem possible, then probable, then inevitable. Your financial life will never be the same. Not because something magical happens, because you change, because you see what you did not see before, because you do what you did not do before, because the small daily actions compound into transformation that seems dramatic from the outside but was actually gradual, inevitable, the result of patterns practiced until they became automatic. The patterns you have now were also practiced until they became automatic. They just lead somewhere you do not want to go. The question is whether you will replace them with patterns that lead somewhere better, or whether you will continue doing what you have always done and arriving where you have always arrived. Most people will continue as they are. They will read this or hear this and feel momentarily motivated and then return to the patterns that guarantee nothing changes. Not because they are incapable, because change is hard and the familiar is comfortable, and the path of least resistance leads exactly where they already are. You do not have to be most people. You can audit today. You can make a decision about your next payday before it arrives. You can automate a transfer, even a small one, that pays your future self first. You can build a system that does not depend on motivation. You can stop comparing and start acting. You can take control of the financial life that has been controlling you. The transformation is not eventual. It begins the day you start, and every day you continue, it deepens. The person you are a year from now will look back at this moment as the beginning of everything that changed. Or they will look back and see one more piece of advice that made no difference because it was never applied.